I started out playing with Nintendo consoles back when I was very young, probably about 5 or so, whenever I got the Game Boy Advance SP. I started out with Pokemon Ruby, and then I eventually bought Pokemon Emerald with birthday money. Personally, I enjoy playing the Pokemon and the Zelda games. I've never been as big of a Mario fan. On my Nintendo Switch, I do also buy a lot of indie or third-party games, not made by Nintendo, because it's just a really good console to just play those on and just kind of have and take them with me. The history of Nintendo actually started out as just kind of a card company back in the late 1800s. Then they just kind of went on from there to produce various toys and other games usually aimed for kids. They got into video games back in the 70s when someone at Nintendo noticed that a man was playing with his calculator just on the train, and so they kind of thought of a way to try and alleviate the boredom, so they created a game series called Game & Watch, which was a series of small handhelds. But it started out as just kind of simple basic games that you can play and use just kind of anywhere, and they had really good battery life, so they lasted for a while. But they did end up moving into portable handheld consoles that were meant to play multiple games. This Game Boy is a fan favorite still to this day, but they did end up moving on to a newer handheld with the Game Boy Color, which was only a minor step up. It just allowed for color details to be added to games. It was mostly kind of a random process to where it just kind of picked color palettes and placed them onto games. In terms of its competition though, both of these consoles did end up falling behind up until the Game Boy Advance released, but it is a longer, thicker console, all one piece similar to the first two. However, it is turned horizontally instead of being vertical. However, that console also got a minor step up with the Game Boy Advance SP. It ended up having the clamshell design that the DS line also adopted, though it only had a single screen because unlike all the other products in the line, this one had a backlit screen. Going from the Game Boy Advance SP, you then have the Nintendo DS line. It had dual screens, one was a touchscreen however, which was a newer feature, and it was compatible with the Game Boy Advance games. However, they did eventually phase that out with the Nintendo DSi. The Nintendo DS got its upgrade, the 3DS, in 2011. After all this time of just gradual improvements, they did eventually release the new 3DS, which had better hardware than the original 3DS. People were wondering whenever Nintendo was going to release their next handheld, and since their home console, the Wii U, was struggling, they decided to implement technologies from both their handheld and their home console segments to create the Nintendo Switch, which is their current console, and it's quickly becoming one of the fastest selling consoles of all time. This console currently has two different variants, the Nintendo Switch Lite and just the standard Nintendo Switch. Both of these include a handheld mode, but only the original Switch model can connect to a TV as well. One of the things that is currently making Nintendo a lot of money right now during this pandemic is the Nintendo Switch Lite. The Nintendo Switch Lite is around $100 cheaper, and so it allows more people to get into it. This is more in line with their older handhelds that were typically a lot cheaper than their home consoles. So this is trying to bridge the gap further between having a cheaper handheld-only console and a more expensive home console that the Nintendo Switch tries to be. Currently, with the current pandemic, a lot of people have been buying Nintendo Switches because they want to play Animal Crossing, which is a game series that's been around for a while. Animal Crossing first came out on the GameCube, which was not one of their handhelds, but it did eventually make its way over to the DS, the 3DS, and it is now on the Nintendo Switch. And it helps people get their mind off of the current state of the world by just kind of going away into their own little world. I think Nintendo's best selling point throughout all the years is just its ease of access to get into their lineup. Typically, Nintendo's consoles have been cheaper, and they usually have a very good selection of games. They also sell a lot of games based on nostalgia. People remember playing older Mario and Zelda games, and so whenever they see a new one come out, they're like, oh, I should end up getting, a DS to play, or a 3DS, or a Game Boy. That way they can just kind of relive some of their old nostalgia, but with newer games. This also helps it be passed along to their kids, who watch their parents grow up with it, talk about it, and so then they end up buying into the same nostalgia factor that their parents did, which further continues just Nintendo's profits.